The war had become endless. Every sunrise felt the same. Every night filled with the same news. Another colony gone, another fleet lost. People stopped looking at the stars with hope. They looked at them with fear. The Xylar Dominion had come like a cold storm, silent and merciless. They were not creatures of blood and heart. They were machines built from silver bone and cold code. They had no faces, no voices, only a strange blue light that glowed from their metal shells. And in that light, humanity's worlds burned. For years, Earth fought back. They sent fleet after fleet, commander after commander, each one brave, each one certain they could turn the tide. But the Xylar were always waiting. Their ships were faster, their weapons sharper, their logic perfect. Humanity fought with courage. The Xylar fought with precision, and courage alone was not enough. By the year 2284, the war had reached its final edge. Earth's colonies on Mars and Europa had fallen. Luna Base was silent. The orbital stations around Neptune, once bright and busy, were now nothing but broken rings of debris. The few human ships that still roamed the stars were tired, wounded and scattered like lost birds. And then one night a whisper began to spread. It started in the dark corners of the fleet networks, among the engineers and smugglers and soldiers who still believed there might be a way out. The message was simple, only 3 words long. The Black Star lives. No one believed it at first. The USS Black Star had been a myth for years, a story told to keep morale alive. A secret project built under the ice of Titan, humanity's most advanced warship designed for a day that might never come. People said it had been canceled or destroyed or locked away because its technology was too dangerous. Others said it was waiting, just waiting, for the right captain. Now the message had returned, and for the first time in months, people dared to hope again. Far away, beneath Titan's thick orange clouds, the secret shipyard came alive. Ice cracked and trembled as buried hangars opened for the first time in decades. Inside, surrounded by frozen mist, rested the USS Black Star. It was not like any other human ship. It didn't shine like metal or reflect light. Its hull was black, so black that it swallowed the light around it, turning space itself into a cloak. Engineers who worked on it said the ship looked alive, as if it were watching you when you passed. Every part of it was built for one purpose: to survive the unstoppable and to destroy the impossible. The ship's heart was something no one outside the project fully understood. A weapon powered by a controlled singularity, a fragment of a black hole bound inside an energy core. A weapon that could bend space, crush fleets, or tear gravity itself. Some called it madness. Others called it salvation. The woman chosen to command it was Captain Mara Vance. She was not the loudest or most decorated officer. She didn't wear medals or give grand speeches, but she had something the others had lost: belief. She had seen her home destroyed, her family gone, her old crew lost in battle, and yet she still looked toward the stars, not with hatred. With when the USS Black Star finally came alive, the stars seemed to hold their breath. Titan's ice fields glowed under the power lines that ran deep below the surface, shaking as ancient engines woke from their long sleep. Dust fell from the hangar ceilings. The frozen air rippled with light. Deep inside, among the echo of machines and soft alarms, stood Captain Mara Vance, her gloved hand resting on the cold wall of the ship she had waited her whole life to see. She whispered quietly, "It's time." The command deck was silent except for the low hum of the awakening core. Engineers moved fast, their voices tight with fear and excitement. They had waited years for this moment, building the ship in secret, feeding their hopes into its heart. Now, as the Black Star began to breathe, every person in that room could feel it. Something powerful and ancient was waking up. The lights flickered once. Then, all across the ship, systems came online. "Primary power restored," said the chief engineer, his voice shaking. "Neural links stabilizing. Energy core holding steady." He paused, staring at the readings. "Captain, it's responding faster than we calculated." Vance's eyes stayed on the main display, a swirl of dark light forming deep in the ship's center. "It's not just a machine," she said quietly. "It's listening." Outside, beyond Titan's hazy atmosphere, the stars stretched across the black sky, cold, beautiful, and silent. Humanity's last great ship, hidden for decades, rose from the ice like a shadow given form. Steam burst from vents as the ship's hull shed the frost of 1,000 Titan nights. The engines glowed faintly blue, then deepened into an impossible black, swallowing all light around them. The Black Star was awake. When the launch command came, there was no cheering. The crew simply stood at their stations, silent, watching as the ship rose higher and higher through the golden clouds of Titan. For many, it was the first time they had felt pride in years. For others, it was the last thing they would ever see. "Engine stable," reported Lieutenant Gray. "Flight path locked to escape trajectory." Captain Vance nodded. "Take us out." The ship pierced the clouds, broke free of Titan's sky, and entered the endless dark of space. Ahead of them was a single destination, the Perseus front, where humanity's last defense line was collapsing. On the way there, the crew settled into the rhythm of the ship. The corridors were narrow, the air cold and dry, the lights dimmed to save power. Every sound echoed through the steel halls. The steady heartbeat of the engines, the faint buzz of the reactor core, the murmurs of tired voices. But in that silence, something strange happened. The crew began to feel the Black Star itself. It was as if the ship had a soul, or maybe just an echo of one. Systems reacted before commands were spoken. Doors opened softly when someone approached. The lights pulsed gently, almost like breathing. It was beautiful and eerie all at once. Some said it was just advanced AI code. Others said it was the singularity inside, watching, waiting. But Captain Vance knew better. She could feel it. This ship wanted to fight. It wanted to protect what was left of humankind. In the captain's quarters, Vance sat alone, staring at the small hollow photo on her desk. It was a picture of her brother, smiling, younger, wearing his pilot uniform. He had died 2 years earlier when his ship, the Aurora Dawn, was cut apart by the Xylar fleet. His final transmission had ended mid-sentence, a scream swallowed by static. That memory had never left her. It burned quietly behind her calm expression. She reached out and touched the image. "Your fight's not over yet," she whispered. When the USS Black Star dropped out of warp, the crew saw hell. The Perseus front, once filled with the proud ships of the United Terran Fleet, was now a graveyard. Thousands of vessels floated in silence, their hulls cracked, their lights gone. Fire drifted between the wrecks, glowing faintly against the endless dark. You could almost believe the stars themselves were crying. Everywhere, the Xylar Dominion moved like a swarm. Their ships were smooth, silver arcs that glided through the void with perfect, cold grace. They fired beams of pale blue light that cut through metal and flesh as if neither mattered. They didn't shout, they didn't warn. They simply erased everything they saw. On the bridge of the Black Star, no one spoke. The sensors showed what the eyes could not bear. The last Terran defense line was falling. The fleet's command ship, the TFS Resolute, had gone silent only minutes ago. The Dominion's victory was almost complete. Captain Mara Vance stood at the center of the bridge, staring at the main screen. Her voice was calm, but her heart was pounding like thunder. "Bring up all human frequencies," she said. The comms officer hesitated. "Ma'am, most of them are gone." "But wait, I'm catching something." A broken voice crackled through the static. "To any Terran unit, this is the Ardent Flame. We're losing engines. Dominion closing in. Need assist?" The transmission cut out. Vance turned toward the helmsman. "Plot a course," the officer blinked. "Captain, we're outnumbered 100 to 1. "I didn't ask for the odds," she replied quietly. "I asked for a course." The Black Star moved forward, cutting through the debris field like a silent ghost. Fragments of human ships drifted by. Names half burned away, flags torn and floating. As they passed the wreck of the Resolute, the crew saw faces frozen in shattered viewports, eyes staring out into forever. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. And then the Dominion saw them. A dozen enemy ships turned toward the newcomer. Their sensors locked, scanning the strange dark hull that gave no reflection, no signature. For a moment they hesitated. This was no Terran ship. They recognized. This was something else. The Xylar fleet sent a transmission, cold, digital, and cruel. Unidentified human craft. Power down and surrender. Resistance is irrelevant. Vance smiled faintly without humor. "Resistance," she whispered, "is human." She looked to her weapons officer. "Targeting solution?" "Locked on all hostiles, Captain." The bridge went quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's core, rising like a heartbeat. "Then fire," Vance said. What followed was light and fury. The event lance fired its first shot. a beam of compressed energy brighter than any sun. For a heartbeat, space itself seemed to tear apart. When the light faded, the enemy ships were simply gone. Vaporized, erased, their metal turned to dust. Every Dominion sensor across the battlefield blinked in confusion. Their perfect logic couldn't understand what had happened. No weapon they had ever seen could do that. The Black Star didn't stop. It fired again. And again. Each strike tore through another formation. Each explosion painted the void with burning blue fragments. On board, the crew watched in awe and horror. The ship's power readings spiked beyond safety limits, but the reactor held firm, glowing like a caged star. Multiple enemy signatures destroyed, the weapons officer reported. "Captain, we just saved what's left of the fleet." Vance exhaled slowly. "Good. Now let's keep them alive." Across the remaining Terran ships, stunned voices echoed over comms. "Who the hell is that? Did you see that shot? Is that— wait, oh God, it's the Black Star." The words spread like fire. Hope, for the first time in years, returned to human voices. The Dominion adapted quickly. More ships arrived, larger ones, forming a ring around the Black Star. Their weapons charged, their artificial minds calculating. They would not underestimate this human anomaly again. On the bridge, red lights flashed. The ship's shields rippled under the first wave of counterfire. The impact shook the deck, sending sparks through the air. "Shields holding," Lieutenant Gray shouted. "But not for long." Vance gripped the railing, her eyes sharp. "Then we don't stop," she said. "This isn't a ship. It's a message." She looked out at the endless stars, the graves of her people, the light of her enemies, the dark waiting between. "Let them hear us," she whispered. "Let them see what humanity does when it's cornered." And with that, the Black Star turned toward the heart of the Dominion fleet. The engines roared, the event lance burned, and humanity's last hope charged into the fire. The war for the stars had changed forever. The USS Black Star moved like a living storm through the dark. Every engine pulse left a trail of light. Every cannon blast painted fire across the void. Around her, the Xylar Dominion's silver fleet tightened its circle, confident that numbers alone could crush even this monster of a ship. They were wrong. Inside the bridge, the air trembled with energy. The lights flickered with every surge from the reactor core. The crew worked fast, voices overlapping, eyes fixed on their glowing screens. And at the center of it all stood Captain Mara Vance, calm and still, her eyes bright with something fierce, something human. "Event lance charging," called the weapons officer. "Target locked on the nearest cluster." Vance nodded. "Fire at will," the ship roared. For one terrible moment, the stars themselves disappeared behind the light of the Black Star's weapon. It was not just a beam. It was a piece of creation itself, raw and uncontrollable. It hit the Dominion formation, and the silence of space turned into a storm. Metal vaporized. Ships tore apart like paper. The Xylar swarm, once so proud, so cold, vanished in seconds. Only glowing dust remained, floating like dying fireflies. The crew stared, speechless. Even the hum of the ship seemed softer now, like it was breathing after holding itself still. But victory came with a whisper of warning. In the engine core, deep below the main deck, red lights began to pulse. The singularity at the ship's heart, the tiny, captured black hole that gave it power, was waking faster than expected. The energy regulators screamed as readings climbed. Chief Engineer Rose slammed his palm against a console. "It's drawing too much power. Every time we fire, the containment field weakens. Can we stabilize it?" Vance's voice came through the comm. "Maybe," Rose said. "But if it keeps building like this, she'll burn herself from the inside out." There was silence for a heartbeat. Then came Vance's reply. "Then we keep going until the galaxy remembers who we are." Ro hesitated, then smiled sadly. "Aye, Captain." The Dominion tried to regroup. More ships arrived. Massive carriers and war machines bigger than cities. Their formation stretched across half the battlefield, their weapons shining blue like frozen stars. They fired all at once. The shock waves slammed into the Black Star. Alarms wailed, sparks flew from panels, and smoke curled through the bridge. The crew fought to keep systems stable, but the pressure was brutal. The shields flared, flickering between life and collapse. "Shields at 40%, Lieutenant Gray shouted. "Reactor output unstable." Still, Vance didn't move. She stood tall, her hands gripping the console. Her eyes locked on the enemy flagship at the center of the formation. a monstrous silver vessel shaped like a blade. "That's their command node," she said softly. "If we take that out, the swarm loses coordination." Her first officer looked at her in disbelief. "Captain, to reach that, we'd have to fly through the entire armada." Vance turned her head slightly, her voice steady. "Then that's what we'll do." The engine screamed as the Black Star surged forward, cutting through the waves of fire. Missiles chased them. Energy beams crossed their path. Each impact shook the hull, but the ship held on. It was as if it refused to die. In the lower decks, engineers worked with bare hands, patching coolant leaks and sealing burst pipes. The heat was unbearable. Sparks rained from the ceiling. One of the young crewmen fell to his knees, exhausted. Chief Rowe grabbed him by the shoulder. "On your feet, son. She's still fighting, so we do too." The boy nodded weakly and kept working. On the bridge, the weapons officer's voice broke through the chaos. "Captain, target in range!" Vance's hand hovered over the firing control. For a moment, she closed her eyes. She thought of Earth, the green forest she hadn't seen since she was a child, the ocean she used to dream about. She thought of her brother, of his laugh, of his last message. She whispered to herself, "For you, Sam." Then louder, "Fire!" The event lance unleashed again, brighter, louder, more furious than before. The entire Dominion fleet seemed to shudder as the beam tore through their center. The enemy command ship exploded in a silent bloom of light. One by one, the remaining ships broke formation, their coordination lost. The human fleet, what was left of it, watched in awe as the enemy began to fall back. Someone whispered over the comms, "They're retreating. They're actually retreating." For the first time in years, humanity had turned the tide. But on the Black Star, victory tasted bitter. The energy core howled, growing unstable. Red lights flooded every deck. The hull creaked as if the ship itself were crying out. Captain Vance stared at the damage report. The ship had done the impossible, but it had paid the price. Her first officer looked at her. "She can't take another shot like that, Captain." Vance nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the fading stars. "Then we make this count." Outside, the remains of the Dominion fleet regrouped at a distance, fearful but not finished. They were gathering their strength for one final strike. And as the Black Star turned to face them again, its engines glowing with fading fire, the crew understood the truth. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to be remembered. The battlefield had finally gone quiet, but the silence felt heavy, too heavy. The USS Black Star drifted through the wreckage like a wounded beast. Its dark hull cracked, its engines flickering with a tired blue glow. Inside, the ship groaned as if each metal plate remembered the fire it had unleashed. Captain Mara Vance stood at the center of the bridge, staring at the dimming lights. Sweat ran down her face. Her hands trembled, partly from exhaustion, partly from fear. The ship had survived the impossible, but she could feel it. Something inside the Black Star was breaking. "Reactor readings?" Vance asked quietly. Her chief science officer, Elia, swallowed hard. "Captain, the singularity core is destabilizing. We've pushed it too far." She hesitated, then added, "If the containment fails, the ship won't explode. It will collapse in on itself. A small black hole, Captain, enough to erase us." The crew stared at the display as the numbers climbed. It was like watching a heart fail. Vance took a slow breath. "What are our options?" "Shut down the event lance," Elia replied. "All weapons offline. All jumps offline. Every system connects to the core. If we keep using it, every second brings us closer to collapse." Her first officer stepped forward. "Captain, if the Dominion attacks again, we won't be able to fire back. We'll be defenseless." Vance closed her eyes briefly. She remembered the fleets that had burned. She remembered her brother's last cry for help. She remembered the promise she made, to fight until humanity could stand again. "Defenseless," she whispered. The word felt like a knife. The alarms echoed once more as another surge shook the ship. Panels sparked. A cold draft swept across the bridge as the air filtration system flickered. The Black Star felt weaker with each breath. Down in the engineering deck, Chief Rowe ran from console to console, shouting orders. "Get those coolant lines stable. Seal that leak before we lose the entire compartment. No, don't touch that wire. It's live, but the damage was everywhere. The walls were hot to the touch." The reactor chamber glowed with a violent shifting light, like a caged star fighting to escape. A young engineer collapsed beside him, coughing from smoke. "Sir." We can't hold it. The core keeps pulling harder. It's like it's alive. Ro knelt down and gripped the young man's shoulder. His face was streaked with grease and fear, but his eyes were steady. She is alive, he said softly, and she's hurting. So we help her. Stand up, the young man nodded weakly. They returned to the controls, hands shaking but determined. Back on the bridge, a message came through the comms. Soft, broken, but human. This is the ardent flame. Blackstar, thank you. You saved us. Another voice followed. This is the cruiser Valiant Dawn. We're pulling survivors from wrecks. We owe you everything. Then a third, Blackstar. We thought humanity was finished. But you showed us. We still have teeth. The crew listened, their hearts swelling with a bittersweet mix of pride and sorrow. They had saved lives. They had given hope. But the cost was rising with every second. Vance turned her gaze to the stars. The remaining Dominion forces were regrouping at a distance, afraid to come closer, yet not willing to retreat completely. They hovered like vultures watching the Blackstar bleed. They know we're weak, Vance murmured. Her first officer nodded grimly. They're waiting for the right moment. And they'll get it soon, Elia added. If the core keeps destabilizing, the ship will tear itself apart, whether they fire or not. Silence filled the bridge. The price of power was becoming clear. Vance looked around at her crew. Tired faces, burned uniforms, trembling hands. Each one had fought with everything they had. They had trusted her, followed her into fire, and stood strong through every impossible moment. They deserved to live. They deserved peace. But the Blackstar had given everything she could. The next battle might be the last. Vance walked to the front of the bridge and rested her hand on the observation window. Outside, the stars shimmered through cracks in the hull, like small lights trying to comfort the dying giant. She whispered, almost to herself, "You were never meant to fight this alone, were you?" The ship answered with a low, sorrowful hum as if it understood. Suddenly, a harsh alarm broke the quiet. "Captain," Gray shouted, "Dominion ships are moving. They're forming attack lines. They're coming for us." The bridge lit up with red lights, weapons offline, shields unstable, hull integrity failing. Elia turned to Vance, fear in her voice. "If they hit us now, we won't survive." Vance took one steady breath. "Then we give the crew a chance," she said. "We find a way to keep her alive long enough for humanity to escape this place." The officers stared at her. They knew what she meant, and their hearts tightened. The price of power was sacrifice. The USS Blackstar floated in the middle of a broken sky. All around her were the ruins of war, burned ships, shattered hulls, frozen bodies drifting through the dark. The glow of her engines flickered weakly now, like a candle fighting against the wind. Inside, her crew worked in silence. There was nothing left to say. Everyone knew the truth. The ship's heart, the Singularity Core, was dying. It could no longer be tamed. And yet, even as the walls trembled and the lights dimmed, no one left their post. They were not afraid anymore. They had seen what they could do. They had made the galaxy remember the name of humanity. On the bridge, Captain Mara Vance stood still, her face pale in the red emergency light. The reports came in quietly around her. Shields failing, hull breach in Sector 12, reactor containment down to 10%. Each word was another nail in the coffin, but her voice, when it came, was calm. Status of the evacuation? Her first officer, Lieutenant Gray, looked up with tired eyes. "We've sent coordinates to the surviving Terran ships. They're pulling back from the front line. We've bought them enough time to escape the system." Vance nodded slowly. "Good." Then she turned toward the main display. Far in the distance, the Dominion fleet was reforming. Thousands of silver ships stretched across the stars, gathering for their final strike. The Xylar had learned fear, but they had not forgotten vengeance. In the engineering deck, Chief Rowe knelt beside the reactor housing. The floor was shaking, metal plates glowing with heat. The singularity at the ship's core pulsed like a dark heart, growing faster, brighter. The energy was unstable, seconds from collapse. An engineer shouted over the roar, "We can't hold it." "The core's going critical." Rowe clenched his teeth. "Then let's make it worth it." He opened a channel to the bridge. "Captain, there's only one way to stop the core from tearing itself apart. We have to release the containment." The moment the USS Blackstar vanished, the stars went silent. No explosion. No sound, just a sudden, blinding light that swallowed everything, white, pure, endless. Then it was gone. Where once there had been the might of the Xylar Dominion, there was now only silence and a field of drifting dust glowing softly in the dark. The human fleet, scattered and broken, watched from a distance, their screens filled with static for several long seconds before the signal cleared. The Dominion ships, thousands of them, were simply gone. No trace, no wreckage. It was as if the universe had decided to erase them, and the Black Star too was gone. For a long time no one spoke. Every voice, every breath, felt trapped in their throats. Then slowly, someone whispered across the comms, "She did it." No one had to ask who she was. Days later, word reached every surviving human colony. The message was short, carried through the remnants of the old Terran network. The USS Black Star entered the war, and nothing could resist its fire. The people of Earth heard it first, then the miners on Mars, then the refugees hiding beneath the frozen domes of Europa. Everywhere the same silence followed, then the same sound, people crying. Not from sorrow alone, but from pride. For the first time in years, humanity stood tall again. At the Terran command base, the surviving officers gathered. A hollow image flickered above the table, a star map showing the Perseus front, now marked as neutral space. The Dominion had fallen back completely. Their fleets were in disarray, their signals broken. Humanity had survived the impossible, but the cost hung heavy in the room. Admiral Ryan spoke softly. "There's no sign of the Black Star. No signal, no debris, just that light." Another officer whispered, "She sacrificed everything." Ryan nodded slowly. "She gave us back our future." They all stood in silence for a while, heads bowed, not just for the ship, but for the people who had sailed her into legend. Months passed. The war was declared over. The Dominion, crippled and leaderless, never returned. Humanity rebuilt slowly, cautiously. New ships were forged in orbit. New cities rose from ashes, and every ship carried a mark on its hull, a small black star, to honor the one that had saved them all. Children grew up hearing the story. They learned how a single ship, born in secret and flown by the brave, had faced the unbreakable and won. They learned the name of the captain, Mara Vance, and how she gave everything so others could live. But what they didn't know, what no one could see, was that far beyond the edges of known space, something still glowed. In a quiet corner of the Perseus sector, there was a nebula, soft, silver, and alive with faint blue and gold light. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, and when ships passed near it, their systems would flicker for just a second, as if touched by an unseen signal. Some captains swore they heard faint voices in the static, a woman's calm command, a crew's distant laughter, the hum of an engine that should no longer exist. Scientists called it the Black Star Remnant. The soldiers called it Vance's Light, and those who had fought beside her simply called it home. Years later, a young cadet stood beneath the stars on the academy balcony. He was new to the fleet, nervous and full of questions. His instructor, an old veteran of the war, stood beside him. The cadet pointed toward a faint glow in the night sky. "Sir," he asked, "is that the Black Star's nebula?" The veteran smiled, his eyes reflecting the light. "Aye, son. That's where she rests." The cadet frowned softly. "Do you think she's really gone?" The old man looked at the light for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "Ships like that don't die. They become part of the stars. Every time a human ship jumps into the unknown, every time someone stands their ground when all hope's gone, that's her. That's the Black Star." The cadet nodded, the light shining in his eyes. "Then she's still watching us." The veteran smiled. "Always." And out there in the quiet between galaxies, the light shimmered, soft and endless. If one listened close enough, they might hear a whisper, carried on the windless void. Humanity fights. Humanity endures. The voice was calm, proud, eternal. The stars burned a little brighter that night, and somewhere in the silence of forever, the Black Star still burned, a promise carved into the heart of the universe, that humanity would never fade again. Silence filled the stars. Where moments ago there had been fire, screaming metal and the fury of war, there was now only calm. The USS Black Star was gone. No wreckage, no echo, only a white light fading into darkness. It was as if the ship had never existed. The remaining human ships floated quietly in the distance, their crews watching the place where the Black Star had vanished. For a long time, no one spoke. They couldn't. There were no words left that could carry what they felt. Then, from one of the smaller frigates, a young officer whispered over the open comm line, his voice trembling. She stopped them. Across the fleet, thousands of voices broke into tears. The unbreakable Xylar Dominion, the same enemy that had crushed world after world, was gone. Their fleets had vanished in that single burst of light, their power broken by the one ship that refused to die quietly. Humanity had survived, but the price had been everything. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread like dawn after a long night. Screens flickered to life in the cities, showing only one message. The USS Black Star entered the war. Nothing could resist its fire. People stood in the streets staring. They didn't cheer right away. They didn't dance. They simply stood, tears shining in their eyes, realizing that someone somewhere had finally kept the promise that humanity would not bow down. And slowly, all across the planet, people began to whisper the same words. She saved us. Weeks passed. The wreckage at the Perseus front drifted in silence. Patrol ships searched for signs of the Black Star, hoping for any signal, any piece of hull, any trace of the crew. They found nothing. But they did find something strange. An empty region of space glowing faintly, almost like a living mist. It pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. The sensors couldn't explain it, and no one dared to go too close. When the sunlight hit it just right, it shimmered black and gold, the same colors as the Black Star's hull. The crew of the recovery ships called it Vance's Star. And somehow, everyone who passed near it said the same thing. They could feel something warm, strong, and alive. It wasn't just radiation. It was presence. Years later, the war had ended. The Terran Union rebuilt. Cities were reborn. Ships once again carried explorers and traders instead of soldiers. But one thing never changed. Every ship bore a single Black Star painted near its nameplate. It was tradition, a silent promise to never forget the ship that had given them back the stars. At the new Fleet Academy on Luna, young cadets learned the story of the Black Star in their first week. The instructors didn't call it history. They called it faith. They told of how Captain Mara Vance and her crew faced the impossible. How they fought when everyone else had given up. How when the darkness came for humanity, one ship lit the sky so brightly that even death had to stop and stare. And sometimes, on quiet nights, cadets would look through the observation dome and search for Vance's star. It was faint, almost lost among the constellations, but if you looked carefully, you could always find it pulsing, slow, steady, eternal. One such night, a young cadet named Lyra stood alone on the viewing deck. The stars reflected in her eyes as she whispered softly, "Do you think she's still out there?" An old officer, gray-haired and quiet, stood nearby. He had fought in the war long ago. He smiled faintly. "She never left," he said. "Ships like that don't die. They just become part of the light." Lyra looked at the sky again. "My mother used to tell me the Black Star still watches over us." The old man nodded slowly. "She does. Every time we choose courage over fear, every time we stand for each other. That's her living through us." Lyra smiled, eyes bright. "Then she won, didn't she?" "She did," the old man said softly. "And because of her, we did too." Far away, beyond the reach of human sensors, the nebula shimmered once more. Inside that faint light, something stirred, something vast and gentle. A shape, maybe, or just a memory. It pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat. For a moment, across the quiet of space came a whisper, soft as starlight. Humanity fights. Humanity endures. Then the voice was gone, only the light remained, and in that light, the legend of the Black Star lived forever, not as a weapon, not as a ship, but as the soul of a people who refused to disappear. Even the stars seemed to shine brighter after that night, as if they too remembered.